Hello, today is Wednesday, June 5th, and welcome to episode 344 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Lester Munson. I'm joined today by NSI's Deputy Executive Director and World Traveler Jessica Jones, and my fellow Senior Fellow, Bishop Garrison. Today, we're going to talk about the latest with respect to the war in Gaza. There is a lot going on, a lot of rumors, a lot of stuff being thrown around, a lot of activity on the ground, a lot of diplomacy. Let's get into it. CIA Director Bill Burns, who many people see as the Biden administration's top diplomat when it comes to really sensitive issues, is on his way to Qatar. Brett McGurk, Deputy National Security Advisor for the Middle East, is on his way to Cairo. They're there to discuss a peace proposal that originated a few weeks ago, probably from the Israelis, involving hostage exchange and a ceasefire, the details of which in public have been moving around quite a bit. Hamas may have already rejected this proposal. It's unclear. We should note that there are still 100 hostages, including some Americans, still in Gaza, who are very much a hot topic, both in the United States, but particularly in Israel. And there's a lot of advocacy on both sides of that. There's a lot of other little tidbits with respect to the Biden administration and the Israeli government. President Biden's folks were talking directly to the other members of the National Security Cabinet in Israel, Bibi's Benjamin Netanyahu's political opponent, Benny Gantz, and also the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, rather than to Netanyahu himself. Notable. Benny Gantz, Netanyahu's political opponent, has said he may be bailing out of the National Security Coalition by September if things don't change with respect to Gaza. Polls in Israel do indicate that Netanyahu's political standing has improved a little bit. We should also note that Joe Biden himself is up for re-election in November. And then there's this very interesting tidbit from President Biden that I want to get into a little bit later, that where he said it appears that Netanyahu has been delaying actions in Gaza, prolonging the conflict for Netanyahu's own political benefit. I want to kind of get into that. There's some other things going on we should note. Hezbollah continues to launch rockets into northern Israel. There's huge fires going on in northern Israel because of these rocket attacks and because of the weather. There's a story in the New York Times that Israel has authorized fake Twitter feeds and synthetic journalism promoting the idea of the U.S. funding the Israeli military, particularly to Democratic audiences in the United States. There is also a conversation about Bibi coming and addressing Congress. There was an invitation from both Speaker Johnson and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer inviting him to do that. It was tentatively scheduled for the 13th, in just a week. That now appears to be off and maybe rescheduled or maybe not rescheduled. So I really want to get into this, Bishop. I'm really interested in your thoughts on these comments from President Biden about Netanyahu. What does this mean? Is this somehow helpful to the situation on the ground in Gaza?
Yeah, this is a very dynamic situation. I think the preservation of life above all of this is what we're really after right now. Like you mentioned, we've had thousands that have recently died from rocket attacks in northern part of the country. We still have the hostages that are part of this that have to be considered, and we're seeing a continuous loss of civilian life on the battleground. So first and foremost, that should be everyone's focus. And a part of that is the ceasefire. Now, we're still getting more details. As you mentioned, Bill Burns is going to travel. Brett McGurk is going to travel. They're going to go and try to talk to some of our allies, some of the people in some of the nations in the region to try to help bring about some level of stability for a long-term agreement. We know that parts of this have not fully been agreed upon quite yet. But that's the thread that we're seeing. Now, in terms of the president's position vis-a-vis Bibi, I think a part of it could be, honestly, some of the frustration of the moment, understanding that he has a world leader here who, let's be frank, it is not necessarily in Bibi's best political interest overall, his long-term interest, given some of his own history, to see this come to an end via a ceasefire. Like that is a true statement. Now, there, I'm sure, are very strategic reasons as to why we would hear that line out publicly for consumption. To be quite frank, it's not something that you would typically see from leaders, heads of state, in terms of the diplomatic piece of this. But we're at a point in which we have consistently seen Israel act in a way that the global community does not necessarily agree with in terms of all of those actions, and it's time to put pressure on them in order to bring them to the table and have a thoughtful conversation about the preservation of life. And I think whatever tool is in the toolkit to do that, the president and the administration need to lean on it and use it.
Jones, what are your thoughts here about Biden's comments? Helpful, not helpful on the ground?
To some extent, I will say, I'm not sure if it was the same interview where he made that comment. He did say it was, Bibi was also not playing a political game. So sometimes I wonder if he's just extremely inarticulate, and saying both sides of the coins. It's really hard to actually determine how serious he was with that comment, but it wouldn't be surprising. I think, he's been trying, it seems, boxing in Israel actions on and decision making on a number of fronts, whether it's Rafah, humanitarian aid, maybe conditions on weapons or not conditions on weapons. And so, in the same way, BB's, we're talking about the political game, like you said, Les, Joe Biden's in an election year. He's got two conflicts that we don't see even close to an end on. We don't even know what an ending would look like, whether it's in the Middle East or whether it's in Europe. He's got extreme division within his own party. There's a widening rift among allies in Europe. He's, he's going to France to mark D-Day, the 80th anniversary this week, and who knows what he's going to meet amongst his European nation heads there. And while Hamas might not be in a rush to end the conflict, right, because they're seeing a surge of support for the Palestinian cause, you have also got Republicans maybe in Congress seeing some advantage here when it comes to sanctions on the ICC, the vote there, vote on weapons to Israel, and so there's a lot of politics in play here, sowing divisions within the Democratic Party as we go into the fall elections.
All right, I'm gonna throw an idea out here.
No,
you guys make some great points.
Ready. Let's go.
Are you ready? And I want you to give honest reaction. I think President Biden is clearly making some political decisions with respect for his own purposes with respect to Gaza. He's worried about November. He's worried about different constituencies. He's trying to thread the needle, and I think that basic idea is a mistake. I think if he put as his first priority an effective endpoint for the conflict in Gaza and doubled down on it and showed real leadership and stuck to his guns and took a tough position that maybe wasn't popular with certain constituencies and stuck to it and saw this out and was consistently articulating that message in the face of some criticism, he would actually be doing better in his polling and would have a better chance in November. That, in other words, take a tough position, take some risks, let people shoot some arrows at you, but be presidential, stand up and take a principled stand on this. I see him as being I don't see a lot of principle here. I see a lot of clever maneuvering, a lot of comments that appeal to certain segments and not to others, and kind of like doing a little bit of a juggling act here. And I think that's overall a mistake. I think it would be better to see him both politically for him and for events on the ground, take the tough position and stick to it in the face of criticism.
We're at the cusp of that. I think that's exactly what this type of act, like moving out with your top diplomats for your for the most sensitive of policy points in the region, you've got to push them both out. And he's come out and said, he thinks.
Yeah, it seems like he's going full force, like to Bishop's point, for this three-stage plan. Or do you not?
He said Bibi is pulling political punches here, and I mean, like, albeit for a president to play to some degree into politics, I mean, that's a part of what they do and what they have to do in order to maneuver and find success. So I think, to your point, Les, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm passionately agreeing with you. As a matter of fact, I think that we are right there. Like, what he lacks in grace.
That's how much energy he gets after the 2 sleepless nights.
What he lacks in grace, he makes up for in gumption, and that's exactly what this is right here. I mean, like joking before, this is Diamond Joe. Like, this is what he does. He's been in the political in the political sphere for quite some time now, and I think we're going to see that here and now. This will, if nothing else, it'll define his legacy for sure.
I'm worried that him basically saying it's on Hamas now to come to an agreement. We have a good proposal on the table. They need to agree. The hostages need to go. This is all originally their fault anyway. And then also saying it's Netanyahu has prolonged this thing for his own political gain, when in fact it's really Biden who's also been doing something very similar. I think risks looking like he's playing both sides, and he's saying I was for it before I was against it, or I'm against it and I'm for it. It is too indecisive. It is too schizophrenic.
It's very cynical.
That is my concern.
Very
Pick a
cynical
side,
take, sir.
own it, and Maybe so, but I think it also is reflected in the fact that he's not doing well in the polls, and we're not seeing a lot of success on the ground. Okay, that's a wrap. Thanks so much to Devlin Burney, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for helping produce today's episode. Join us again on Friday, June 7th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.